So let's now proceed with the retina. So we know that the retina basically is very important because this will contain the photoreceptors of the eye, who is necessary for the actual sight of an individual. And there are certain anomalies of the retina, which could include the retinal dysplasia. And again, we have the term dysplasia. So this is the faulty differentiation of the retina, especially involving the photoreceptor cells. And so these photoreceptor cells are basically composed of these light-sensitive rods and cones of the retina. Now, this could be inherited, but can be also due to certain deficiencies such as vitamin A deficiency. This may also be due to X-ray irradiation or even certain intrauterine trauma. Aside from anomalies, the retina is also prone to inflammatory retinal degeneration. And so when we say degeneration, in this case, there will be loss of photoreceptors and other retinal neurons. Okay? Such as in the case, for example, in infection. Canine distemper infection may result to degeneration of the ganglion cell layer as well as pseudorabies infection. But with toxoplasmosis, usually this would result in an inflammation, so the retina and the choroid, so retinochoroiditis. And again, so that would cause degeneration, particularly of the retina. We also have certain toxic retinal degeneration, so not inflammatory but toxic causes. As in the case, for example, of Brackenfern poisoning. So initially affected would be the layers of the rods and cones, then the inner and outer nuclear layer of the retina as well. But aside from inflammatory and toxic, there could also be nutritional retinal degeneration. In this case, in particular, would be taurine deficiency in cats. So this would affect the layers of the rods and cones as well. Then we also have retinal detachment. Again, we say retinal detachment. Simply, this is the separation of the neurosensory retina from the retinal pigment epithelium. So this part basically detaches from this part of the retina. And that would be the case, then this would lead to complete loss of vision of the animal. So as in this case, for example, so take note of the actual retinal detachment. So that part of the tunic of the globe. So that with the case, then this can lead to total loss of vision of the animal. Now, how about the cornea? An inflammation of the cornea is known as keratitis. And if the conjunctiva is involved, then we have keratoconjunctivitis. So this results in diffuse scarring as well as the loss of the transparency of the cornea. So there's so many possible causes, including Moraxella, particularly Moraxella bovis, the causative agent of pink eye, or infectious bovine keratoconjunctivitis, Chlamydophila species, certain nematodes or the eyeworm, vitamin A deficiency, chemical irritants, and even trauma. So all of this may cause inflammation, and of course the opacity of the cornea. So here, certain keratoconjunctivitis, if the conjunctiva is also involved. But we also have the term keratoconjunctivitis sicca. So basically, it is a keratitis, but with reduction in the lacrimal secretion, resulting in dryness of the cornea as well as the conjunctiva. That's why keratoconjunctivitis sicca is also known as dry eye or xerophthalmia. So this may be associated with systemic disorders such as systemic lupus erythematosus as well as sclerosis. But this could be also due to senile atrophy of the lacrimal glands or following destruction by canine distemper virus, trauma, or other infection. So take note that because of that senile atrophy of the lacrimal glands, most of the aged or geriatric individuals may have dry eye, and which is very common also among human beings. We also have pigmentary keratitis. Okay? So this is the deposition of melanin pigment in the corneal epithelium as well as the underlying stroma. Okay? That's why this pigmentary keratitis is also known as corneal melanosis because of the deposition of melanin. Okay? So neutrophils, okay, and fibroblastic and angioplasmic growth factors may be deposited onto the cornea, leading to stromal edema as well as vascularization as well. So there could be brown or black color, depending on the pigment on the cornea. Okay, and this pigmentation often destroys the sight of the animal. Now, in terms of vascularization, we say vascularization, so capillaries in general may extend to the cornea, specifically when there is an ulceration or trauma to the cornea. So this could be a manifestation also of riboflavin and tryptophan deficiency in animals. Pannus, specifically Pannus degenerativus. So this is the invasion of the outer layer of the cornea by tissue containing many blood vessels which grow in from the conjunctiva. So this pannus is often associated with glaucoma. Okay, and on the latter part, so granulation tissue may remain as scar tissue and undergo calcification. So in any case of pannus or pannus degenerativus, the cornea is always thickened. So corneal ulceration again is one of the most common injury to the eye, and there are several sequela to corneal ulceration. First, there could be scars or scar formation leading to corneal opacity. And the degree may be classified as nebula, that would create only faint clouding of the cornea. It's termed macula if there's a definite gray opacity of the cornea, or glaucoma if there's dense white opacity of the cornea. So again, these opacities may result from scarring due to injury. Take note that during injury, the usual response would be mitosis of the keratocytes. So this will transform into fibroblasts with accompanying blood vessels as well as granulation tissue formation, and eventually this will be remodeled and organized to form such scar on the cornea. No? Now, failure of healing usually results in this scar tissue formation. Okay? Now, keratoectasia, this is the bulging of the thin, scarred cornea. Again, so because of the pressure inside the globe, so this may cause that bulging. Or descemetocele, which is actually the protrusion of the descemet's membrane into the ulcerated cornea. And of course, we have discussed glaucoma. Although, again, corneal opacity may result also from certain infections such as infectious canine hepatitis virus, or this may result from vaccination from such vaccine. So again, the degree of corneal ulceration may be only up to the extent of the epithelium, to the extent of the stroma, but less seldom to the Descemet's membrane, because Descemet's membrane is a very tough membrane of the eye. Now, I have discussed a while ago the descemetocele. So basically, this descemetocele is the protrusion of the Descemet's membrane into the ulcer, so as in this case. So again, being very tough, is not usually being destroyed during trauma or injury to the cornea, such that this Descemet's membrane may tend to bulge or to protrude. And of course, that may contain the aqueous humor coming from the anterior chamber of the eye. Clinical signs of corneal disease. First, we have blepharospasm. Again, spasm of the eyelids. So this is because the cornea contains numerous nerve endings, and it's very sensitive to pain. Such that whenever there's pain, there's spasm of the eyelid. Another one is epipora. So this is the excessive tear formation of production with the eye. Or photophobia. So the animal is afraid of light. Endophthalmos. So this is not necessarily the exact opposite of exophthalmos. But this one is the withdrawal of the globe into the orbit, causing the protrusion of the other structures such as the nictitating membrane. So we have endophthalmos. Chemosis is simply conjunctival edema. And miosis means a small pupil. And of course, we also have certain congestion and hyperemia of the cornea itself. Now, how about the uvea? As I've said from the previous lecture, uvea basically is the pigmented vascular tunic of the globe. So this is divided into an anterior uvea or a posterior uvea. So the anterior uvea basically is made up of the iris and the ciliary body. So that would be the anterior uvea. And the choroid, black one, so that would be the posterior uvea. So therefore, if we have posterior uveitis, so basically that is choroiditis. And if we have anterior uveitis, so that could pertain to the inflammation of the iris as well as the ciliary body. So we also have certain anomalies such as aniridia. So aniridia basically is the total absence of the iris. Coloboma. So this is the absence of one of the ocular tissues. And heterochromia iridis. So there is the lack of expected color within a part or all of the iris of the animal. So this is commonly due to variation in the number of melanocytes. Such that when we say heterochromia iridis, so this is basically a hypopigmentation of the iris. Now, uveitis or the inflammatory condition, as I've said, this may involve only the iris, so we have the iritis, cyclitis or inflammation of the ciliary bodies, choroiditis, so inflammation of the choroid. Iridocyclitis is the inflammation of the iris and ciliary bodies. And panuveitis, so this is the inflammation of the entire uvea. So this inflammation could be suppurative, non-suppurative, or granulomatous depending on the agent involved. But take note that we also have what we call equine recurrent uveitis, is the common cause of night blindness among horses. So this could be due to certain infection, particularly Leptospira. Okay? So we also have purulent uveitis or hypopyon, in which exudates, particularly consisting of neutrophils and fibrin, may tend to accumulate in the anterior chamber of the eye. Another interesting disorder is synechiae. Okay? So this is the addition between the iris and the anterior part of the eye. So this is one of the common sequela to uveitis. So synechia can be categorized as either anterior or posterior synechia. When we say anterior synechia, this is the addition between the anterior surface of the iris and the posterior corneal surface. Again, anterior synechia is basically the addition between the anterior surface of the iris and the posterior surface of the cornea. So this condition often leads to glaucoma. So again, when we say glaucoma, so there could be an increase in the intraocular pressure because of an imbalance in the production and the drainage of the anterior chamber fluid, or the aqueous humor. So in this case, when the aqueous humor is produced by the ciliary body to the posterior chamber, to the anterior chamber, then this cannot leave the anterior chamber via the Slem's canal. So therefore, there's an accumulation of fluid here. So therefore, anterior synechia often leads to glaucoma. And oftentimes, this may affect the movement of the iris as well. So remember that this iris may move depending on the light intensity, such that this may contract or dilate the pupil. Remember that the pupil is just an area between this iris. So that may also affect the dilation and constriction of the pupil. We also have posterior synechia. So this is an addition between the posterior surface of the iris and the anterior lens. So this time naman, the iris and the lens. So this is more frequent sequel of iritis. So again, this may block the flow of aqueous humor from the posterior chamber. So the aqueous humor will stay in the posterior chamber because they cannot leave the posterior chamber into the anterior chamber. So fluid then accumulates behind the iris, causing it to bulge forward. So the iris may bulge forward. An increase in the intraocular pressure then pushes the iris forward, causing it to bulge, a condition known as iris bombay. So this may cause permanent closure of the pupil as well. So therefore, even if you put some mydriatics, the iris may fail to dilate. So again, that may affect the size of the pupil of the affected individual. Another condition is prolapse of the third eyelid. So this may be caused by an inflammation or probably a certain infection. And of course, Okay, we have discussed this, ano? So, divergent kay is strabismus. Okay, so there's an abnormal kay alignment kay of the globe. Now, let us proceed with kay the ear pathology. So, just an overview kay of the anatomy and function kay of the ear. So, remember that the ear kay is an organ kay that is considered necessary for the sense of hearing. But aside from that, it is also important kay for the sense of balance of an individual. So therefore, the ear is responsible for both hearing and balance. So the ear is divided into an external ear, middle ear, and an inner ear. Okay? So the external ear captures the sound. It funnels it to the tympanic membrane. Okay? Vibrates and moves the ossicles in the middle ear. Now, so up to this point, yung ating external ear. Okay? Up to the tympanic membrane. So that sound may vibrate into the ossicles in the middle ear. So the ossicles, term this the small bones of the ears, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Okay? So this would then cause the movement of the perilimb from the cochlea and semicircular canals. Okay? Now, the osseous labyrinth, would constitute the vestibule, as well as the semicircular canals and the cochlea. Okay? So they could be responsible for the balance as well of the animal. So actually, the sensory organ of hearing is the organ of Corti. So the organ of Corti is just a portion of the cochlear duct. So what are disorders of the external ear? First, we have congenital anomalies. Okay? So we have the term macrotia. M-A-C-R-O-T-I-A. So macrotia. Okay? This means an abnormally large pinna. On the other hand, we have microtia. So this is an abnormally small pinna. And anosia, so the absence of pinna. But there is certain condition also of polyosia. So we have numerous pinna. We also have ear tip necrosis and fissures. So usually this is caused by frostbite, for example, certain toxicity such as ergot, septicemia, or even trauma. We also have auricular hematoma, particular hematoma of the pinna or the external ear. Dermatologic diseases which may involve infection, either parasitic, fungal, or even bacterial. Neoplasms, and even otitis externa. So we have here an ear tip necrosis. As I've said, this necrosis may result from frostbite, ergot poisoning, septicemia, or even trauma. Trauma from scratching, rubbing, or shaking of the head. But this could also result from infection, such in this case, Salmonella dublin infection in cattle may also result in ear tip necrosis. So this is a case of oral hematoma. Hematoma of the external ear. So this can result from an intracondylar fracture of the penile cartilage. So take note that the pinna is basically made up of this penile cartilages. So when there's fracture of that penile cartilage, okay, again, okay, so this may lead to bleeding. Okay, and with time, okay, so that hematoma is being replaced by granulation tissue, and contraction usually may result in distortion, okay, of the entire ear. Now, the most common cause of oral hematoma would be violent head shaking, okay, and okay, scratching, okay, of the pinna. Okay. Now, in terms of inflammation, so we have otitis externa as the inflammation of the external ear. So there are so many possible causes, including parasites, such as Otobius begni in dogs, Psoroctes, so just one thing, Psoroctes, Notoedres, and Otodectes. So these are all mites that may cause otitis externa. Okay? It could also be to certain fungi, bacteria such as staph, Strep, Proteus, Pseudomonas, and even E. coli. This may also result from hypersensitivity reaction and even non-infectious otitis from fox tail rust, hypothyroidism, white imbalances, and even Sertoli cell tumor. So all of these are associated with inflammation of the external ear. Okay. A while ago, as I've said, that external ear infection or inflammation may also lead from neoplasms. Okay. Neoplasms may be in the form of adenomas or adenocarcinoma of the ceruminous gland. So in that particular case, nodular growth bulges into the auditory canal with the resultant golden brown crystalline pigment in the cytoplasm of the epithelial cells. So that would be the characteristic of the neoplasm or adenoma or adenocarcinoma of the ceruminous gland. So we should expect certain discharges from this particular tumor itself. Now, let us go now to the middle ear. So, an inflammation of the middle ear is known as otitis media. So, this otitis media could be an extension of the otitis externa. So again, when we have otitis externa, that inflammation, specifically when infection is the cause, may also lead to otitis media. Inflammation of the middle ear. Although this otitis media may also result from hematogenous spread, or via the eustachian tube. So because of its close association with the eustachian tube. So often, bacteria such as Archaeobacterium, Mycoplasma, or fungi may cause otitis media. But regardless of the cause, the tympanic cavity is filled with exudate, and this exudate usually is purulent and chronic in nature. So aside from otitis media, there could also be nasopharyngeal polyp. Eustachitis or inflammation of the eustachian tube. So again, this often precedes otitis media. So otitis media in swine caused by Pasteurella and Actinomyces. But we also have guttural pouch mycosis causing the internal carotid artery to rupture. This is caused by, most of the time, Aspergillus species in association with Streptococci. So on the slide, we also have this cholesteatoma. cholesteatoma. Again, cholesteatoma. Okay, so these are somewhat like cotyledons that are found in the middle ear. So they tend to accumulate in the middle ear. So this is guttural pouch mycosis. So that's it. Okay, so this is an inflammation of the guttural pouch. Of course, guttural pouch, we are referring here to of horses because they do have guttural pouches. So an inflammation of the guttural pouch can extend to the wall of the internal carotid artery, causing arteritis and weakening of the wall of that particular artery. So eventually, that would lead to rupture of the internal carotid artery, which may result to an excessive epistaxis, hemorrhage, which may even lead to death of the animal. Now, aside from guttural pouch mycosis, so there could also have other conditions involving the guttural pouch, including guttural pouch empyema. Again, you say guttural pouch empyema, so there's pus in the guttural pouch. Or guttural pouch tympani, in which there is an entrapment of air in the guttural pouch. So these are the possible bacterial agents that are involved in our otitis media. So a range of microorganisms from Archaeobacterium, Corynebacterium, E. coli, Staph, Mycoplasma, Pasteurella, Proteus, Pseudomonas, and even streptococcal organisms. But take note that there are also fungal causes such as Candida, Aspergillus, even Malassezia pachydermatis that may cause otitis media. And the last, we have the inner ear. So, when the inner ear is affected, most of the time, this will lead to deafness. Deafness or the loss of hearing. Again, so this could be due to, or this could be inherited, as in the case, for example, of inherited dysplasia of the cochlear duct in Dalmatian. So an inherited dysplasia of the cochlear duct usually may result in deafness. So Dalmatian is the breed that is more prone to this particular defect. Now, deafness or loss of hearing can be categorized as either central, conductive, or peripheral. When I say central deafness, this the cause would involve the brain as well as the auditory pathway. That's why it's called central deafness. Probably there is a defect on the nerves connecting the brain to the auditory nerve. The second one is conductive deafness. This will result if the lesion would involve the external or the middle ear. And we have peripheral deafness if the cochlea is involved. So, aside from this inherited dysplasia of the cochlear duct among Dalmatian, inherited or hereditary deafness may also be associated with white hair in cats. Such white hair in cats is caused is deficiency of the pigmented cells in the stria vascularis. So again, we have a certain white hair, inherited white hair in cats, in which is associated with deficiency of pigmented cells as well in the stria vascularis. So this is found on the ear as well. So this results in secondary collapse of the organ of Corti. Remember, as I've said, that the organ of Corti is actually the organ of hearing. Okay? Now, this is also associated with heterochromia iridis, okay? Or a differential coloration of the iris. Usually, there's dominant white gene that suppresses the deposition of melanin in the skin, at the same time, suppresses the deposition of melanin in the iris. So we have heterochromia iridis. But again, that is also associated with the deficiency in the pigmentation of the cells of the stria vascularis, resulting in collapse of the organ of Corti, hence deafness. So these are all interrelated. Okay? But we also have a certain toxicity, which could be classified as toxic. Again, this could be due to certain drugs that tend to be ototoxic. For example, we have certain gentamicin, for example, that could be toxic. Acoustic, or due to loud sounds. Inflammation, neoplasia, or even senility or old age. So neoplasm, so squamous cell carcinoma may also affect the inner ear as well as certain adenoma. So depending on the degree of damage that's being created by this particular carcinoma. Now, in terms of inflammatory condition, an inflammatory condition involving the inner ear is known as otitis interna. But since the internal ear involves this labyrinth, an inflammation of the internal ear is also known as labyrinthitis. So labyrinthitis or otitis interna can cause effacement of the cochlear duct. And effacement or destruction of the cochlear duct eventually would result to a disturbance in the equilibrium of the animal. So therefore, if the inner ear is involved, not only deafness is seen on an animal, but another manifestation is the disturbance in the equilibrium. So I think that's the end of our discussion. So we have discussed the different organ systems, and including these two special organs, the ear and the eye. So that's the end of our systemic pathology.